my phone.
Her ETA is 7:20, so if you just hang out.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for waiting. I appreciate it. We were taken a little unawares by some accidents and some bad traffic, so we took a kind of roundabout way. I got to see some beautiful Massachusetts highways. But not nearly as exciting as being here. And thank you also to those who took pictures with the jewelry and posted them on social media for me. It made for an entertaining drive out here. And if you have not gotten your picture taken before this is over, go put on those green gems and pose. Show your friends and then tag me so I can see them. Normally at an event I start by reading, but usually that's because we're in the middle of a series and we all know everybody. We know those crazy vampire kids and what's going on. We can jump right in. Glittering Court is brand new. I know some people it's hard kind of processing, like moving on to a new series because we do still love those vampire kids. So instead of reading from the Glittering Report, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, just to sort of get you more into that world. And then we'll do questions for a little bit, just whatever else is on your mind. And you can ask about vampires. You can ask about life advice, new books, writing advice. If you want to talk about reality TV, I'm all over that too. It'll be all up to you guys. So the Glittering Court, which hopefully you guys all have and are getting for your friends and neighbors and cousins and stuff, is my newest series. It's set in a world that I've made up. It's a fantasy world, but it's not like Lord of the Rings fantasy, which tends to be sort of, it resembles medieval Europe. This world is meant to resemble Elizabethan England and the early American colonies, because I just feel like that's something no one ever really plays with in fantasy. And the premise of this setup is that there's this school/business that takes girls who don't have many prospects, maybe they're poor or have like 10 siblings. They take them and they train them up to be ladies. They take culture lessons, dance lessons, language lessons, all sorts of things. Polish them up and then they send them across the sea to this newly settled world in the hopes of finding respectable marriages, which actually is not as crazy as I thought it was when I invented this for this book. Apparently people actually tried things like this, not without the finishing school, or with the finishing school thing, but in early America, male settlers outnumbered women 3-1. And so people would try to do this, like get a bunch of women and sell them off in America for like bushels of tobacco and things like that. It was much less glamorous than the world I've created. And what's important to me about this book, though, is I wanted to show a different type of strong woman. When Vampire Academy came out and it started getting a lot of attention, I get these interviews from people that their minds were just blown that there was a strong woman character. And they're like, what made you think to do that? And I was like, why would you not think to do that? You know, Rose Hathaway's cool, but she's not like this weird phantom creature, right? Strong women should not be that shocking. And I feel like over time, like people have kind of accepted that, but we still get this idea sometimes that women are only strong if they're wearing leather and getting into fist fights. And if that is your style, anyone out there, I'm not judging you. That's cool. That's Rose's style, and I'm into it. But I think in real life, most of us fight our battles with our wits, with our strength of character, our integrity. And so I wanted to show a book where these girls are kick-ass in their own way, even if they're wearing pretty dresses and ostensibly going off to balls and things like that. They have their own ways of being strong and getting into a lot of adventure and action. So that was kind of what I'm going for, just to show all kinds of strength. And the last thing I'll say before we dive into your questions is this book is the first in a trilogy, and each book tells the same story from a different point of view. And so you will see things in this book that you're like, some guy walked across the room, whatever, that's not important. And then in the next book, you're going to find out he was a spy or something that was pivotal to the next girl's story. So for the most part, you should be able to read this book and not even know/care that there are other things going on until you read the next ones, and then you're going to be like, oh my God, I understand how that works, especially at the ending, because they all three kind of come together, and you'll get the full scope of that after you've read them. But not to confuse you, you don't need them right now. This is fully contained. It's a good time. Just be prepared. There's a lot more to come. And yes?
I have a question about
Sydney and bloodlines. What made you choose to make Sydney study witchcraft in the books?
Well, the whole introduction of I'll back up a little bit, of how Sydney became instrumental as the main character in Bloodlines was to show a contrast to the Vampire Academy world. Because, you know, when we start off with the very first Vampire Academy book, we have Lissa and Rose who are born into this world. And this is what they know. You, the reader, are put inside of it. This is all totally normal. It's a school with vampires. There's a room where people are drinking blood. That's how it is, and we're cool with it. And with Bloodlines, you know, I wanted to give us a human character who's looking at this world from an outsider's point of view. Sydney did not grow up in this world. It is not cool that there are people drinking blood in the next room, as far as she's concerned. And so Sydney is the human aspect of that. And I introduced the type of witchcraft used in here as a human type of magic. So the vampires, all of theirs is internal. They're born with it, it comes out. Sydney has to actually sort of take hers from the world. And for me, that was sort of how I envisioned humans as non-magical creatures. If we want to do it, you've sort of got to scrap it together, and you have to study which suits her very well. So that's kind of the roundabout way of where that came from.
So when you started writing the Vampire Academy series, how far into it did you finally realize that Adrian was like a big enough character to start in the series?
So the question is, when did I know Adrian would get his own series, and did he start off that complex? He did not start off that complex, and I can tell you there are very few surprises for me in the things I write. I hear a lot of authors, they'll talk about like, oh, my character told me to do this, and I'm like, I don't know what kind of loose operation you're running, but I do what I tell them to do. There's no surprises. And Adrian is kind of the exception. I mean, I still hold the leash, so don't think he's running away on me. But you know, he was kind of originally set up as this romantic foil for Dimitri, like this contrast for Rose. And halfway through, publishing always works so much farther ahead than what you're reading. You know, we were talking about a spin-off, who would be in it, and like I knew Adrian's fate. I knew how Vampire Academy was going to end, and I was like, this is a guy we can't let go, because you see him throughout even the first series. He's very different. He's already grown. He's still a long ways from being mature or responsible, but then we see just a huge jump there. So he did take me by surprise. So to circle back, I'd say about halfway through, I decided, you know, he would get his own series. And even though I knew I was going to pair him with Sydney, I didn't realize until I was actually writing the two of them just how much he could grow, and she grew too. It was a very interesting duo to write.
How did you first come up with the idea for like the setting of Soundless, like that village that we can't hear anything?
The setting for Soundless. So if you're not familiar with Soundless, it's a village where it's set in this kind of Chinese fantasy world where nobody can hear. Thank you. I'm not sure what it is. It's actually this one right here, but it's fine. Don't worry. Don't worry, I don't have to see, I just have to talk. Soundless, I chose the Chinese background, mythological background, because again, kind of like with the early American fantasy, I just feel like no one plays with fantasy worlds done out of other cultures. And as far as the soundless aspect to it, it was just a huge writing challenge. And as a writer, you do want to try new things, if only to see what can you do as a writer. And that was Soundless's challenge, is how do you not just write a world without sound, how do you write someone who discovers sound? Because the character starts off not being able to hear, and then a couple chapters in she can, that's not a huge spoiler. She, trying to, how do you describe that if you're writing a book? You know, okay, this girl's never heard before. I walked across the room and I heard the door squeak. Would she say that? How does she know what a squeak is? How do I describe sounds from the viewpoint of someone who's never heard a sound before? And so it was just this huge kind of experiment to try to do a book like that, you know, and it is a standalone, it's just a one-off, but I just kind of wanted to see, is this something that I can do? And if you guys can think of a genre to describe the Glittering Court, I would love that. I call it fantasy. I call anything in a made-up world fantasy, because that's how I grew up. If anyone knows like Jacqueline Carey's books or Guy Gabriel Kay, they kind of do this historically inspired fantasy, but some people say it has to have magic to be fantasy. But it's not history, because I made up the history. So what? but it's not alternate history because it's not like I took our world and changed it, see? I don't know, I'm not putting you guys on the spot or anything. You don't have to tell me right now. I'm just saying, if you think of it, let me know because I've had people ask me and I'm like, I don't know, just read it, just read it.
I know in Vampire Academy and Bloodlines, you kind of play around with like mental illness. What made you kind of like bring that into the vampire world? And with Sydney, I know she has like that eating disorder where she like counts her calories because of her father who always like criticized her. What kind of like inspired you to bring that in?
So the question is about, there's a lot of mental illness actually in both series, first and second Vampire Academy series. Where did that come from? And there's two reasons for that. One is that my whole family, and I assume everyone has, I don't know, people pretend they have perfect families, but there's a lot of, in my family, I've seen eating disorders, depression, bipolar disorder. I mean, it's something that I've grown up with and have seen around me. So it's something I'm familiar with and don't think it is something that should be ignored. And I think when you're dealing with paranormal creatures, there is an idea, there's a tendency to want to ignore that kind of stuff. Like, they are just magical and don't have any problems, but I try to write fantastic creatures as very human. I want them to feel real, and to me, they should be having those same problems. And so that's why depression is an issue, and self-inflicting pain. I mean, those are issues we see in the first series. Adrian being bipolar, you know, learning how to cope. Like, I want to live those highs, but I still need to be a normal life. I think that grounds them. I think it would be weird if people are too perfect and don't suffer from those things. And I also think it's important to show that people do adapt and manage those things, because that's important too. I think there's a horrible stigma about mental illness in our society right now, where it's like a death sentence, like, oh, he's done, there's nothing that can be, you know, done to save him, and that's not true. You know, people get treated and they go on, and so that's kind of the design behind that. I'm gonna wrap it up since we did get a late start, but by all means, please do ask me questions when you come up to the signing table. Hang out where you are for a second because they're going to direct you. I can still, even though we're a little behind, I'll still happily do pictures with you guys.
Are you excited?
No.
Or just this one? One of those.
There. Smile. Great.
Thank you. I think I saw your picture on Twitter, right?
Yes.
We're going to take the photo first. There.